reach all these people.
Yeah.
Thank you. We've been out here for more than half a year in this office, working with the community, going to the people, to their doors, to the supermarkets, going to protests and picket lines. We've been there, we've stand up, and we're with you guys. Thank you so much. So we're going to have a lot of cool people speaking today. And I'd like to introduce probably somebody that everybody in here knows. We're going to introduce Debbie Berger, the president of the National Nurses United.
Thank you so much for giving up a Saturday to make your community and your country better. Only nurses and workers understand what it's like to not have access to health care, to have air that you can't breathe, to have water that you can't drink. Nurses see it every single day. I've been a nurse for 47 years, and I know what it means to have to deny treatment because you can't afford it, right? It is really criminal, it's immoral, and we need to change that. We also need to make sure that our environment is protected because we can't have good health if we don't have good drinking water and clean air. You see that every single day. I'm from Sonoma County, where they had one of the biggest fires in California, and our planet is on fire. We just saw Australia on fire. This country and this globe is on fire. We need to change that. It's extremely important. Bernie has a plan for a Green New Deal to improve that. He is going to make that happen. But he needs to be elected president so he can do that. And we don't get to go away once he's elected. We have to be out there to keep the pressure on the people. So, how many of you have seen patients or a family member or a friend that has had to deny their treatments or their medications or is hurt by the healthcare system here? Right. Look at all these stories. Every single one of you can tell a story when you're knocking on doors today about what it's like to have to deal with a situation where you can't provide the kind of care you need or you don't have access to the kind of care you need. That is key. The other thing is union workers, right? We all work together. And if you look at Bernie's campaign, what does he say? Not me, us. That's the thing behind unions, is it's us. It's all of us working together to make our communities and our country better. And that is why we believe, as nurses, we have endorsed Bernie because he understands that concept. It's not about him, it's about all of us together working to make this country better, right? So, today, I'm really appreciating all of the work and commitment that you're all doing, and we can't do it without you. That's what he is trying to say. That is his message. So when you look at all of his platform, when the nurses made their choice, the reason we finally settled on Bernie Sanders was his level of commitment. For 40 years, he has had the same platform. He hasn't changed it. He's actually improved it because he took some of our ideas and incorporated But we know he is consistent, and his level of degree to fighting and making sure that we all have a place to put our head at night and to be able to have access to health care is key. So thank you all for coming, and now I'm really excited to introduce you to Naomi Klein. She puts things in perspective and really helps point out where we need to focus our attention. She actually helped to write the Green New Deal. And what is key is that she gives us ammunition to fight back all of these people that try to make our country an unlivable environment. So welcome, Naomi.
You can just immediately feel like, okay, we're all right. And you know, I would follow NNU anywhere. You have shown such visionary leadership, such clarity. You have been the leading voice for Medicare for All. You were with Bernie before it was a thing. And you know, you talked about, Deborah, you talked about the fires, you know, the fires of climate disruption. We are in them, right? We're not in a moment where we're talking about a crisis that is off in the future. It's hit, we're in it. We screwed up. We did not act when we should have acted, but it is not too late to prevent suffering on a truly unimaginable scale. But it takes a willingness to embrace transformational action. You know, I find it so interesting when people talk about, oh, he's too radical, right? As if we stay on the road we're on, that's not radical.
Right.
You know, if we keep doing what we're doing, or we just tinker in response, we end up in a very radical place. I was in Paradise, California after it was burned to the ground, right? I have friends in Australia who had newborns in the midst of these fires, there is a generation of kids now whose first breaths for weeks of life was that air, that plume of smoke that you could see in New Zealand, right? This is the world that we are creating. These are the fires of climate disruption. We can put them out, but it does require that we admit that it now takes deep change, right? We cannot be afraid to live up to our historical moment. That is what I love about Bernie Sanders. This is a man who is living up to his historical moment, right? He is working so hard. It is hard to keep up with him. It is true, as he says, right? I mean, this campaign is filled with young people who can't keep up with him, right? We have to live up to our political moment, because it isn't only the fires of climate disruption we're facing. Those fires are now intersecting with the fires of fascism, hatred, xenophobia. This is what Trump represents, right? This is a moment where people are afraid, right? They're afraid of everything. Their standard of living is precarious. And you know, I believe whether or not people say they deny climate change or not, we all know that our very home is in crisis, right? And this makes people vulnerable to the demagogues of the world, around the world, not just Trump. Modi, Duterte, all these guys who come in and say, you're the in-group, I'll protect you. I'll protect you from the out-groups, right? The out-groups on the border, inside your country, the dangerous other, right? Tomorrow, Bernie's going to El Paso, Texas. You know? A few months ago, a person who described himself as a white nationalist eco-terrorist walked into a Walmart and started killing Mexicans. And he said, well, they can't have the same way of life that we have. That's their way of responding to climate disruption. What's ours? Okay? We've got the fires of climate disruption. We have the fires of hatred, but there's a third fire. It's our fire. It is the fire of this movement, right? I'm glad you're all wearing red. I'm wearing my red. Because we have to feel that fire, right? We are not going to get the world that we need, that is going to keep us safe, if we're kind of sort of in favor of it. We are going to have to fight for it. And that is what the Green New Deal is all about, right? And, you know, I see people in this room from NNU who I met in Standing Rock, who were standing with the water protectors, the land defenders. I see people in this room who I met in the mountains of Puerto Rico after Hurricane Maria. I see people in this room who were who were in New Orleans after Hurricane Maria. Nurses are first responders in this crisis already, right? The Green New Deal is a vision that brings all of our movements together. We know in Puerto Rico that what stole 3,000 lives wasn't falling debris. It was a collapsed healthcare system and a collapsed electricity system, right? We can't pry these crises apart. And so, as I said, you know, I'm willing to follow the nurses anywhere. You know, you are the midwives of this new world in a very real sense. And you bring so much fire to this movement. And it's important to remember, you know, fire is a life-giving force as well, right? We're not talking about the fires of destruction and annihilation. That's what happens when you misuse fire, when you dig stuff up that you shouldn't dig up and burn it. That creates havoc, right? But fire is also the source of all life on Earth, that ball of fire in the sky. And indigenous peoples have been using fire for millennia, right? To manage the land, to clear away the debris and make room for new growth. And that's the fire that we need to locate. We've got a lot of debris to clear, right? All over the place, all right? But that's what we need to do, right? And that fertilizes the ground and the new world comes. And that is the moment we're in. And that's why we're under attack, because people are scared, right? My family comes from the United States, but I grew up in Canada. Now I'm back in the US. I grew up in a system that had Medicare for all. Okay, I'm lucky. There was a lot of resistance when they first introduced Medicare in Canada. The doctors fought it off. You know, there was all kinds of scaremongering. Now, every politician, no matter what party they are, no matter how far right they are, you cannot win an election in Canada unless you claim that swear allegiance to our healthcare system, because it is the most popular program. It crosses all political boundaries, right? So there's always going to be those growing pains, there's always going to be resistance, but once we're through it, people will defend it. You know, and this is what we need to do. We need to work through the fear. And we know that there's been conflict within the labor movement. The reason why it is so important that NNU is here is that you, nurses, are on the front lines as workers of this healthcare crisis. You know more than anyone else how untenable this is and how much better it can be and how impossible a situation as healers you are put into in this for-profit system. There are some things that are more important than money. Okay?
Yeah. Amen.
We live in a world right now where the most powerful people on our planet seem to be willing to burn it down for money. Okay? It's a system that's gone mad, and we have to take it away from them. And that's what we're going to do. That's what we're going to do.
Yeah.
Right. Now, these next few hours are so important, right? The caucus, we've got a lot of support here in Nevada, but it's not about the polls, right? Yeah. I went to New Hampshire where the senator had a very strong lead. It's about turnout, right? So we can't take comfort in the polls. What we need to do is we need to explain to people, as only you can, how much is on the line. And so you need to ask people, please, give us your Saturday. Give us your Saturday. We know it's inconvenient. We need those hours. They are the best investment you can make in your future, your children's future, their future. We have to do this together. So, Deborah, you mentioned Bernie's consistency. And I watch those old videos like you all do, right? And we take comfort in them, that Bernie has been saying the right things for so long. But there's also a sadness in it. Because if Bernie had been listened to,
exactly,
how many lives would have been saved if we had had Medicare for all when he was first talking about it?
68,000 a year.
How many lives would have been saved if he had been listened to in 1988 when he was sounding the alarm about climate change? And how many lives would have been saved if he had been listened to about the illegal invasion of Iraq and so many other illegal interventions? If Bernie was right about the past, let us believe that he is right about the future, that we can win. It is a duty to believe that and to help other people through their fear so that they can believe it too. It is now my honor to introduce my friend, my comrade, Jose La Luz, a warrior for social justice, a lifelong trade unionist. I met him in Canada at a trade union convention. We re-met in the mountains in Puerto Rico after Hurricane Maria. He is a true defender of working people, of Latinos, and an honorary midwife of this movement.
Las Vegas, are we ready for the political revolution?
Yes.
Are we ready for the political revolution?
Yes.
Are we ready for the political revolution?
Yes.
So,
Our movement is about saving lives.
Yes.
I learned that when 50 members of your union came to San Juan at the request of Mayor Carmen Yulín Cruz as part of a group of 350 union members from all over America. And I remember in a conversation with some of your sisters and brothers who insisted that they needed to get to the towns where people were losing their lives. That's when I learned the meaning of saving lives. Our movement is about saving lives.
Amen.
Tens of thousands of men and women die every year in this country. Tens of thousands lose their most valuable property in order to pay for health care for their loved ones, for themselves. I have heard that with my own eyes around the country, and this is a travesty in the wealthiest country on the face of the earth. Not to have universal health care is a travesty. And not only is it a travesty not to have universal health care in the wealthiest country on the face of the earth, it is an aberration, because in fact, in most countries around the world, not only across the Atlantic, in Europe, in Mexico, in Argentina, in Costa Rica, in Uruguay, there is universal health care. And no one can tell me that this is a question of how we are going to pay for it. We will pay for it the same way we send people to the moon. The same way we pay for wars. We will have universal health care in America. And I know that you know that working men and women and their families have been the subject of a coordinated, sustained, and escalating assault on their standard of living.
Yes.
And you and I know that our unions are threatened. And you and I also know that Bernie Sanders will put an end to that. Because Bernie Sanders did not discover the power of workers coming together to build unions yesterday. This is not about the flavor of the month.
No.
This is about a man whose entire life has been devoted to work hard to build power for men, for women who work for a living. Because you and I know that consistency matters. Consistency matters. Consistency matters. And sisters and brothers, you and I know that we are going to take a giant leap tomorrow on the long march to the White House. And Bernie Sanders will become the next president of the United States. I know that because I myself have been knocking on doors. And I have been knocking on doors here in this neighborhood. And when I get to a door and somebody says, I'm sorry, I'm in the middle of cooking now. There is a voice that comes from the back that says, Mommy, Papi, those are the Bernie Sanders people! You gotta talk to them! Tío Bernie! Tío Bernie! Tío Bernie! Yes, because you know what I have seen and heard with my own eyes. Latino families who live in terror because they have a target on their backs. As Naomi was saying, I was in El Paso a few days after the massacre. I know how our people fear every single day, but they are also learning that there is a man who will put an end to that. Because Bernie Sanders, in his very first day of office, will make it possible for many of our men and women to come out of the shadows, out of the shadows, out of the shadows. And tomorrow, you and I will see the power of men and women coming out of the shadows to cast their ballot for Bernie Sanders.